Did we really think the silence in Brussels would last forever? Did we believe the most powerful woman in Europe could never be challenged? That assumption is now being questioned. What reportedly happened behind closed doors at the European Council this morning was not routine political debate. According to several accounts, Viktor Orbán confronted the leadership directly. He did not simply criticize policy. He raised serious allegations. And this time, the pressure is not focused on Hungary. It is focused on the European Commission. For years, many people were told that certain matters were settled. But Viktor Orbán now claims there is more beneath the surface. He suggests there may be documents indicating that major financial decisions involving billions of euros were shaped behind closed doors before the public or national parliaments were fully informed. These are claims, and they remain disputed. However, they are creating intense debate in Brussels. Reports describe a tense atmosphere inside EU institutions. Journalists have mentioned urgent meetings and sudden schedule changes. A planned press appearance by Ursula von der Leyen was reportedly postponed. Official spokespeople have dismissed the allegations and warned about misinformation, but questions continue to circulate. To understand why this moment matters, we need to look back. On May 14, 2025, the European Court of Justice ruled in case T36/23 that the European Commission had not sufficiently justified its refusal to release certain text messages exchanged between Ursula von der Leyen and Pfizer CEO Albert Bourla. At the time, the issue centered on transparency regarding vaccine procurement agreements worth tens of billions of euros. The court questioned the Commission's reasoning for withholding the messages. Back then, the focus was mainly on transparency in vaccine contracts. But now, Viktor Orbán is connecting that earlier controversy to more recent financial debates, including the proposed €135 billion Ukraine support package introduced in late 2025. He argues there may be broader budgetary implications tied to past procurement decisions. These are allegations, not confirmed facts, but they are fueling political tension. According to Viktor Orbán, internal EU budget allocations may not be as straightforward as publicly presented. He claims that funds promised to some Eastern European countries, including Hungary and Poland, have faced delays or reallocations. EU officials, however, have previously linked funding freezes to rule of law concerns, not budget shortfalls. He has also questioned how the €135 billion Ukraine package would be distributed, suggesting that oversight and transparency should be strengthened. Critics strongly reject his framing and insist that EU financial mechanisms follow established procedures and legal frameworks. Another reported moment of tension occurred during today's meeting. Sources claim Viktor Orbán suggested he could push for full disclosure of previously redacted communications. Whether this will happen remains unclear. The Commission has responded by defending its integrity and emphasizing its commitment to transparency under EU law. Beyond legal arguments, there is a broader public concern. Across countries like Germany, France, and Italy, citizens are dealing with inflation, economic uncertainty, and pressure on household budgets. In such an environment, any perception of financial mismanagement at the EU level can quickly damage public trust. This is no longer simply a policy disagreement between Budapest and Brussels. It has become a debate about transparency, accountability, and institutional credibility. If new evidence were to confirm serious wrongdoing, the political consequences could be significant. If, however, the allegations prove exaggerated or misleading, that too will shape the outcome. The next 48 hours may be important. Will further documents be released? Will there be formal investigations? Or will this dispute shift into a broader political narrative battle? The geopolitical dimension cannot be ignored. The European Union presents itself globally as a defender of transparency, rule of law, and democratic standards. If internal controversies undermine that image, its moral authority abroad could weaken. Allies might reassess their confidence. Critics and rivals could amplify the controversy for strategic reasons. Inside Hungary, supporters of Viktor Orbán see this as validation of long-standing claims that Brussels applies double standards. Meanwhile, EU officials argue that oversight measures are based on legal benchmarks, not political favoritism. There is also another possibility. What if the documents cited are incomplete? What if context changes their meaning? Political conflicts at this level are rarely simple. Bureaucratic complexity, negotiation processes, and institutional rivalry often blur the line between mismanagement and misconduct. Still, perception matters. Even the appearance of secrecy can erode confidence. Members of the European Parliament are already discussing the possibility of hearings. Legal experts are reviewing the implications of the ECJ ruling and whether additional disclosures could be required. Silence from senior leadership is now being closely analyzed. In politics, silence can calm a crisis or intensify it. Markets react to uncertainty. Citizens react to perceived betrayal. Political alliances react to signs of weakness. If even part of these allegations were substantiated through verified investigations, the consequences could extend beyond Brussels into national parliaments and possibly courtrooms. For now, everything remains in the realm of political accusation and response. No final conclusions have been reached, but the debate over transparency, accountability, and trust inside the European Union has clearly entered a new phase. This story is still developing. As more verified information becomes available from official sources, it will shape not only the political future of Ursula von der Leyen, but potentially the direction of the European Union itself. Opposition groups are preparing official statements. Coalition partners are carefully calculating their next steps. They understand that if this situation turns into a formal investigation, it will not end quickly. It could last for months, possibly even years. If a full procedure begins, parliamentary committees could request internal communications. Financial auditors might trace where funds were allocated. Legal teams would argue over definitions, authority, and responsibility. And during all of this, public opinion would continue to form and harden. The most sensitive stage of any political controversy is not the initial accusation. It is the documentation phase. If new leaks appear, partial transcripts, internal memos, financial summaries, the story can begin to move on its own. Control shifts away from institutions and toward media headlines. Once headlines dominate the narrative, managing the damage becomes extremely difficult. Now consider the broader economic climate. Inflation has put pressure on families across Europe. Energy prices have increased. Small businesses are struggling to maintain profits. In this environment, any claim involving billions of euros being mismanaged touches a very sensitive nerve. Citizens who accepted higher taxes or spending cuts in the name of unity may begin asking more direct questions. Accountability becomes not only a legal issue but a moral one. Then there is the leadership question. If confidence in Commission President Ursula von der Leyen weakens significantly, private discussions about succession could begin. Political figures who once showed strong loyalty might start quietly evaluating alternatives. In politics, unity can break quickly when personal survival becomes the priority. The European Union has survived major crises before: financial instability, migration disputes, and Brexit. But every crisis leaves lasting marks. Another internal dispute over legitimacy would deepen those scars. At the same time, one principle must remain central: evidence. Allegations alone cannot decide outcomes. Documents must be verified. Claims must be carefully examined. Due process must be respected. If institutions want to maintain credibility, they must respond with transparency instead of defensiveness. Release what can legally be released. Clarify what can be clarified. Address concerns directly. Delays often increase suspicion. The coming days will test more than individual reputations. They will test whether the European Union can handle internal pressure without falling into serious division. They will test whether political rivalry turns into institutional paralysis. And they will test whether citizens still trust the systems designed to protect them. Watch how national leaders respond. Do they fully defend the Commission? Do they call for independent investigations? Or do they stay neutral? Every response or silence carries meaning. Political storms often begin quietly before becoming powerful. For now, uncertainty dominates. What some are calling the Ursula file is no longer just rumor. It is becoming a developing political confrontation. Viktor Orbán has forced the issue into public debate. Brussels must now decide whether to confront the matter openly or try to let it fade. History shows that institutions survive controversies by facing them directly, not by ignoring them. The question is whether that lesson will be followed. The European Union stands at another crossroads: transparency or turbulence, accountability or continued accusation, reform or resistance. One thing is clear: this situation is not over. As tension increases, another factor becomes important: internal loyalty. In moments like this, political survival often depends less on public speeches and more on private alliances. Who continues to support Ursula von der Leyen behind closed doors? Who begins to quietly distance themselves? Power in Brussels has always relied on networks of shared interests, balanced coalitions, and strategic compromise. If even a few key allies begin to hesitate, the balance can shift quickly. Behind the formal structure of EU institutions lies a reality rarely discussed openly: competition among member states for influence over budgets, regulations, and geopolitical direction. The debate over Ukraine funding was never only about solidarity. It also involved fiscal planning, debt strategy, and long-term economic risk. If Viktor Orbán successfully reframes the discussion from aid package to financial concealment, some governments may reconsider their positions. Leaders who once defended the funding as essential may now call for stronger oversight to protect themselves domestically. Public trust is the foundation of supranational institutions. National governments rely on domestic mandates and historical identity. The European Union depends heavily on perceived fairness and procedural integrity. When that perception weakens, skepticism grows, not only toward individuals but toward the structure itself. Eurosceptic political movements are watching carefully. They do not necessarily need final proof to raise doubts. Uncertainty alone can strengthen their message. Financial markets are also sensitive to instability. Investors value predictability. If questions about budget transparency increase, EU-backed financial instruments could face greater scrutiny. Even speculation can cause volatility. While the EU economy remains strong overall, reputation directly influences confidence. There is also a legal dimension beyond the earlier European Court of Justice ruling. If full communications are eventually released, interpretation will be crucial. Context matters. Timing matters. The difference between normal political negotiation and a procedural violation can depend on small details. However, detailed legal explanations rarely receive as much attention as simplified narratives. Media coverage will likely become more polarized. Some outlets may present Viktor Orbán as challenging entrenched power. Others may describe his actions as destabilizing during a fragile geopolitical period. Both interpretations can exist at the same time, influencing different audiences. In this environment, the information battle can become almost as important as the factual one. Another important question concerns precedent. If private communications between senior officials become central political weapons, future leaders may change how they operate. Greater caution could slow decision-making. Informal diplomacy, often necessary during crises, might become more rigid. Over time, this could create a more bureaucratic and less flexible union. At the same time, calls for reform may grow stronger. Proposals for stricter transparency rules, clearer financial auditing systems, and stronger parliamentary oversight could gain support. Even if Ursula von der Leyen withstands immediate pressure, reform debates may continue. Citizens are not passive observers. Voters influence national governments, and national governments influence Brussels. If public opinion shifts significantly in key countries, leaders will adjust their positions. Polling in the coming weeks may show whether this issue resonates widely with voters or remains mostly within political circles. International partners are also paying attention. The EU's credibility in trade, climate policy, and security cooperation depends on internal unity. Visible division can complicate negotiations and invite strategic pressure from competitors. Still, history shows resilience. The European Union has faced debt crises, constitutional disputes, and the departure of a major member state. Each time, predictions of collapse appeared. Each time, the structure adapted, sometimes slowly, sometimes painfully. This confrontation may follow a similar path: strong turbulence followed by adjustment. The central uncertainty remains the authenticity and completeness of the documents cited by Viktor Orbán. Independent verification will be decisive. Careful auditing and institutional review must move quickly if clarity is to replace speculation. Too much delay allows narratives to become fixed. Leadership during crises is judged not only by defense but by response. A transparent address supported by documented explanations and independent oversight could calm tensions. Prolonged silence or vague denials could deepen doubt. Communication strategy may be as important as legal strategy. Within the European Parliament, some political groups may use this controversy to push other agendas. Budget debates, regulatory reforms, and leadership ambitions could become connected to scandal management. Upcoming parliamentary sessions will reveal whether cooperation or rivalry dominates. As observers, it is important to distinguish between allegation and formal judgment. Democratic systems rely on investigation, not assumption, but they also rely on scrutiny. Oversight is not hostility, it is accountability. If institutions respond constructively, confidence can recover. If they resist examination, distrust can grow. Finally, A broader philosophical debate returns. How centralized should power be within the European system? Situations like this reopen discussions about sovereignty, shared governance, and the balance between national independence and collective decision-making. One fact remains certain. The outcome of this developing situation will influence not only individuals, but potentially the future direction of the European Union itself.